Strikes me as pretty arrogant. I mean, maybe like uncomfortable. You know,
Yes, dear.
Yeah. So I'm trying to see. Yes, we did.
All right, so they're just following up what we do.
Yeah. Stimulating conversation.
It's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, no, I know, and that is actually a huge part of it.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to put a Cat 5 in to make the connection a little better. So I'll put them up.
So we're making progress back here?
Yes.
Okay.
If he wasn't here, we wouldn't get
And that's why we were in the dark, we were more likely to see.
I did.
So we need, I tested it with I've never used it before. So if we get now a DBA case to the,
we have selection
It's taking forever. Oh my gosh. You switch over to Cat 5, think it'll be faster.
You would think, right?
Yeah. Jeez. Heck. God. How you doing, man? Alright, so we got something. Let's see what we got over here. Okay, we're back to business. It says bad, but I mean it's kind of it's good. So yeah, I just have to gaff it down and we're good to go.
You went to get your VGA.
yeah.
Hi, everyone. Let me welcome us at the start. We're working on the complex things of going from computers that only have HDMI out, you know, all schools that have older systems, you know, that have VGA. So, as a technical thing, we'll solve that. I'm Ira Soko. This is Dr. Pam Rand. We're from the Albemarle County Public Schools around Charlottesville, Virginia. This is really a little description of where we work. 726 square mile school district, foothills of the mountains. We have 26 schools, 14,000 students. We 3 comprehensive high schools, range from some of the wealthiest kids in the country who live on plantation and horse homes, to some of the poorest kids, generational poverty that goes back many years, kids who grew up in foster houses and within that range, it's going to be our urban poverty, we have suburban stuff, we have this sort of incredible range, we have about 70 different languages spoken in our schools, schools that are majority Spanish speaking, so a real range of stuff. Within that, Becky Fisher who also works with us, as one of our, I'm supposed to be a tech guru, right?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Do they
We're not
have an
making-
HDMI cable with them, by the way?
Right.
Here's the deal. We don't have a
Oh, wait, is this what we need?
No, we need an HDMI cable.
Right. But,
We've got, there's apparently one in this building, and we have somebody looking for it.
so, right, I mean, we could grab another computer, right, but
Thanks, Mark. So we'll give it about 5 minutes.
5 minutes and then we'll switch. So, okay, that's.
We could do sound or we could do video, but we can't do
Can't do
both at the
both.
same time right now. We'll play the video first and then play the sound first.
The thing we're here to talk about is, it's one of those real buzzwords in education these days, which is, and I spent a lot of time over the last 6 months or so talking about, maybe the last year and a half or so, talking about this issue. It's a real interesting concept, and we want to really, get you guys to work with this and help us think this. And when Chris Lehman asked us to, come and, ask us what we want to talk about, we thought, well, here we are, like a mile from Angela Duckworth's office in the University of Pennsylvania. So why not go after this as an issue? And so we wanted to start with something else that we'll show in a minute. But the next step is we want you guys to think about this, as a group. When you think of stick-to-itiveness, that's close, versus quitting, what do you guys think about? When have you, in your life, decided to stick to something despite all obstacles, and when have you given up on something? Said, no, this isn't working for me. I'll go do something else. Anybody, people can start talking, start getting this.
Let's stop for a minute, and then we'll kind of just invite some conversation about that. We talked about a lot, the kids in school. We want them to be the kind of people who will stick to something and really sit through. But one of the things that Arlen and I started talking about is that there are times when people in life do that, and there are times when you can just go and go on and quit. So we want to kind of think about when it's something about personal experience, the time when you quit something, and what kind of went on for you when that happened, or and a time where you really stayed with something that was challenging, and what kind of really was push that got you stay with it. So just a minute, just share out as a group. We'd like to know this as a start.
I quit soccer, which is to say I only played soccer like I think kind of in 2 years when I was a little kid. And I like sitting around what it wasn't even. It was really maybe until I was like in high school and I'm really not competitive. And that I don't enjoy the meeting moment, like, hey, you and me, let's like sprint to the other hall so you can get there. Like, I was never that kid. I was always like, so I enjoy like more of a cooperative game. Not to say that I don't like to hurt myself and try hard, but the notion of like, I'm going to get really pumped about this because I'm going to try my best to do something for this other team is very like but I kind of just connected that now. And when I was in second grade, I was like, I just don't have this. Like, I couldn't really explain it. why, but that's something that now it's more than my husband always used to play board games until the end of time. I've done that for like 2 rounds. If you won both, that's okay. I'll leave it No, we do. Oh, we do. I do. There's stuff, but yeah, it's like for me, it's more just like, what am I going to get out of this? I just for some reason.
I had to think about it. I'm going to quit things because I was like very.
Right. Yeah.
I actually quit my first master's program. I always forget about, but the engineering one, it's so funny enough. Like my first, so I have a bachelor's in engineering, and then I did the graduate program for a year. The first semester, I failed all my classes because I had my engineering class, my music class, like opera and all that stuff. My advisor called me to his office. He was like, "You're failing all here. Like, of course, you're going to graduate. You have A's in all your music classes." So then the next quarter, then the next semester, I had to work really hard to like get a three degrees. And I was like, I don't like this. So I realized that the same thing. Like looking at the end of it, it's like, do I want to do this? Like, it's not something I love. It's something that I like. And if I work too hard, I don't want to do it. Looking at the things, it's like, no, this is graduate school.
I find it interesting because you were talking about soccer.
Yeah.
In my mind, I see soccer as a cooperative game. You know what I mean?
And what I also remember from that year was that we had like an coach, and he really like who I think was pushed us harder, which may have been great for some of the kids who like had that competitive drive, but I didn't. And I have this vague recollection that like the other coaches were seen as like and maybe focused on the cooperative level more, like cooperative aspect of the more. I don't know.
But then again, I'm thinking about second grade soccer. And there's nothing much cooperative about second grade soccer. It's kind of like
you're all just like
everybody's kind of like running around bumping into each other. So.
It was definitely like to me. I think for I was like many students. I was a kid like through high school. Trying to get out of that. And now that I work in a high school and I'm actually able to do that, I feel supported. Like to be straight.
It's an interesting
But
way to look at it.
then I'm just like yelling back in time to my 15-year-old self, like 15-year-old self, calling me like, and also, I'm not listening. So it's like me and my
Some of I played in the trying to one was like trying to learn to skid stop on my bike, which is like it's just like
Did you quit after you broke something?
I quit after the first time I ever as soon as I like the first time I actually even approached doing it,
Yeah, you're doing the same thing.
Oh my god, this is terrible.
Everything's starting to look like
That one was I'm like, sure.
Well, do you, it's like, do you theoretically believe in vegetarian just
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do sort of, I guess.
So, a lot of conversations as I was wandering around with people sort of agonizing a little bit, trying to remember back the time when they did something as we still pouring some things up. What we went to do. I think people talking about how perseverance can be a real reinforcing emotion as well. One thing I want to tell you is that very clearly, we're going to be talking about two kinds of ways to think about resilience, stick-to-itiveness, all the things that we want kids to be able to do that helps them really get propelled into the life where they can feel like they don't always very self-satisfied. There's also the grit narrative writ large today that's come out of the Angela Duckworth work, and we really want to challenge that a little bit with you. So one of the things that I also want to do is to share with you as we're getting ready to move into this a little bit, that the guy that employs my kid just wrote a blog post, and he tends to be known as somebody who kind of just puts it right out there. So his blog is entitled, How I Made the Choice to Suck at School. I say he puts out, it goes, 4th grade, Mr. Molinari's science class. I got an F on a science test. An F. That's like terrible. Really terrible. To make shit worse, I had to get it signed by my mom. I was definitely not interested in being punished, so I hid it under my bed. It sat there for 2 days, but my conscience still had too much power. I got scared and I told my mom about it. 3 years later, I was flushing every test and report card directly down the toilet. But no joke, I distinctly remember sitting in my small bedroom, crying and debating in my own head, trying to make sense of why I was having such an intense reaction to this test. And then it hit me. This was the thought that changed everything. Screw school, I'm a businessman. Seriously, I thought it. I made the conscious decision to just eat the pain 4 times a year when the report cards came. To eat the pain of failing pretty much daily. I was going to hustle for being viewed as a loser, a kid who didn't have a shot at anything, because I knew what I was truly meant to do. I saw something different. I had enough self-awareness to realize this. It's not that I didn't care. I went to every class. I tried to do the homework. I just decided to hone in on my skills, to concentrate on what made me happy, what fulfilled me. I learned more about selling baseball cards, which then became Wine, which is now WineLibrary.com, and VaynerMedia, and everything I'm so immensely proud of. You know what's more important? It was the first time that I decided to fight what society expected of me and deliver on what made me happy. This brings me to the bottom line here, which is stop doing things that make you unhappy. I've been preaching this since my first book came out and long before that. Sure, it sucked to get those report cards, but I focused on what mattered and it worked. Sometimes you just have to take 10,000 punches before good happens. Miracles don't happen. If they do, it's one in a million. You have to work. You have to put yourself out there. And with work comes discipline. The more you work, the more instances you have to discipline. But don't let those moments fool you. An instance of failure can be a huge opportunity. Pay attention. Learn to be self-aware. I didn't know that stupid test was going to be so important to me. Looking back, I sure as hell do now. But in the moment, I was just doing what felt right. If you have a gut reaction, it's right to do it. If something is so left field and you're inexplicably and uncontrollably attracted to it, do it. 1 app on a test got me started. Hundreds of bad report cards got me going. And if I could go back, I would fail every single test I've ever done. Now what I'd like for you to do is to talk about that when you think about resilience, perseverance, the whole grit frame of that what school is about is helping kids become successful. Have a conversation with each other around that, and we're going to move into a little bit of some shared focus and keep pushing on what does it mean to really build resilience in kids, and is it about grit writ large, which is about kids being successful in school, or could it be about something else that we can do? It's more important than perhaps taking a survey and building a curriculum and setting up schools that are designed to help kids learn how to do school. So have some conversation about maybe it's okay to start in school.
That's going to do my gym example, right?
I feel. You say? Absolutely. So I feel the process all the time because of this. I don't see the process of this. It didn't make it meaningful at all. Even from freshman year, even through senior year, I was in the library after graduation of senior year, still typing my senior thesis. I didn't want to do it, but you have to do it to graduate. I just didn't want to. But if I wanted to do something, I would do it. I used to skip classes to go to other classes because I wanted to take that class and not this. So if I didn't want to do it, so I would fail.
I mean, as a I work in this building and they work at SLA and Beaver, same model. Yeah. I think it's a challenge because when we have kids that are really pushing against the grain, like not just like I suck, but this is the thing I'm interested in, but like I suck and like I'm gonna take issues in everything. But it's a challenge because on one hand it's like you want to respect the individual and like respect their chance to challenge things, but you also don't want them to get so far removed that they like can't connect with society. You know that like because you want them to be able to like make some money and not starve. Not get beat up by like saying something about us on the street like that. And I can think it's not that we have that problem with a lot of kids. Like there are a couple of kids where we're like we hear you, we like understand your problems, but like we also want to help you figure out if you have to like continue and if not like a traditionally successful way. But I'm probably describing your problem as being with the minorities. That's not the problem.
We have definitely a number now. One of our staff meeting discussions. It's just like, he's awesome, participates in everything,
Right.
super involved, loves the school, still can barely every quarter. It's like, we have to push it to participates in conversations, and loves, like, if you saw everything about him, you never saw his grades,
So where's the disconnect?
I have no idea.
No one knows. He doesn't even know. I have conversations with him.
So a big part of it is that he doesn't work. How many times have we tried to he doesn't do that?
When he's in the environment, he doesn't do it.
Or he'll do it for sensitive classes.
But even still, like, he
I want to
doesn't
interrupt here for a second.
That is
A little theoretical, historical grid. Because we're going to look at a couple of things about the grid narrative, and especially where it has generated from this country, which is there was a big start with Angela Duckworth, who's an Arthur genius and a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And to quote Angela Duckworth, her work begins with a guy named Francis Galton. Anybody know that name? Okay. So this is a little thing, if we can get this, the sound going.
That's good.
High school sophomores, 2004, their story.
Won't watch all of it.
Pistons roar, smoke rises on the Industrial Revolution. Cities flourish as flocks of people come in search of opportunities. Modern civilization opens. Traditional colonial structures, church, family, and local law no longer address society's responsibility to care for the needy or punish lawbreakers. Communities search for new solutions to problems posed by its most marginalized members, criminals, orphans, the insane, and the physically handicapped. Prisons, hospitals, and asylums become commonplace by the mid-19th century. Reformers do cultural changes as the reason for the mental and physical handicaps of the institution. Is it not to the habits, the customs, the temptations of civilized society that we owe most of these communities? However, in 1883, Charles Darwin's British cousin, Sir Francis Butler, develops a different explanation for what he perceives to be mental and physical effects. Reverend Mendel's and Darwin's research provides the backbone for Butler's revolutionary belief that people inherit morals and intelligence. Combined together, genetics, eugenics, and social Darwinism lead to new thinking about natural selection in humans. Advocating the regulation of family size based on the parents' hereditary endowment, Butler coins the term eugenics to describe his ideas. Later in the 19th century, Frenchman Alfred Binet fears misuse of the study of mental age. He warns, intelligence is too complex to capture with a single number. By 1900, America's progressive movement emerges, a response to perceived sources of social chaos, urbanization, immigration, and industrialization. But science offers a solution.
The aim of scientific management was to bring everything from the factory floor and production line to legislation regarding unions and rational planning and control. In 1906, H.H. Goddard adds IQ to America's vocabulary, using the term exactly as Binet fears. Goddard, director of the New Jersey Training School, studied the Calicats, a family of so-called feeble-minded criminals, who publicly claims that immorality is, indeed, a hereditary trait related to mental age.
Clusters of families that are common, those families have hereditary problems. And if those families were somehow eliminated, or at least their grandchildren were eliminated, we wouldn't have to deal with the same kinds of social problems.
A seeming abundance of feeble-minded families creates fear that mental institutions face an epidemic of idiocy. Opened in 1910, the Virginia colony for the epileptic and feeble-minded is one such facility. Dr. Albert Priddy, first superintendent of the colony, considers it his responsibility to relieve government of the financial burden of an institution bursting at the seams with outcasts. Like other progressive movement reformers, Priddy believes the interest of society must override the rights of individuals, particularly those deemed defective. He sees eugenics as a version of scientific management, social engineering through reproductive control, and sterilization as a strategy to prevent social problems rather than deal with them.
So, eugenics, which is, the science which stems from Goldman, is the science of ranking people according to sort of hereditary and social intelligence, and of course eliminating those who don't fit in. Not only led to the sterilization of 70,000 people in this country, but of course was the heart of Nazi racial theory. Was constantly quoted by the Nazi Party, American laws and American things. And there are a couple of things that I want to bring forward just as, and I'll go forward a minute and then go back. But, Galton's theory, which is, here's the quote, the stage quote from
So let me read this to you. This is from Duckworth's frame on why grit, in her opinion, is what we should be working on with particularly children that we would in this room probably describe as kids living in poverty, that bring out risk factors to school. And what she says is something like this. Galton suggested that the inclination to pursue, especially challenging aims over months, years, and even decades, is distinct from the capacity to resist the hourly temptations, pursuits which bring momentary pleasure or immediately regret. Understanding how goals are hierarchically organized clarifies how self-control and grit are related but distinct. Self-control entails aligning actions with any valued goal despite momentarily more alluring alternatives. Grit, in contrast, entails having and working assiduously toward a single challenging superordinate goal through thick and thin on a time scale of years or even decades. Although both self-control and grit entail aligning actions with intentions, they operate in different ways and over different time scales. What she uses as a premise for grit goes back to Galton's original beliefs, and she uses them very purposefully on the front page of her website to frame why she believes that the 10-item survey, 12-item survey, to determine whether you in this room, as well as everybody else out there, either has grit or doesn't have it, and what it is that we should be doing to have you learn how to do what she describes.
And we'll look in a little bit, in the first half, in the second half of the first half. It's sort of the history of this as a theory of what it means as an overarching thing. One of those studies that Duckworth quotes the most, besides some of her papers only quote, it's the only reference she has, is a study of New York City camp practice. And she's incredibly upset with these camp practices, who are mostly women and African. Because she says when it rains, they can make the most money. Right. They don't choose to work the longest. They choose to make the amount of money they normally make in a day and go home to be with their family. And she is outraged by this. Just absolutely outraged. These are witless people who will never succeed in life. The question is, what makes them different from Angela Duckworth? And how has she constructed this world in which her definition of grit, which is now spread around our education system, play out of things? So, one of the things we wanted you guys to think about, we'll flash through these and then let you talk for a minute. But, a kid comes to school without homework anymore. What's going on? What's the problem? Is it a lack of grit? Is it the homework? Is it home resources? Some microeconomic choice by the student. That's not good. You know, one of the things I always say, besides the microeconomic choice and the homework when I was in school, is also the fact that, you know, I grew up with 6 people in a 420 square foot home. But I know what's going on. But, and then you have, these are real life things. A kid can't sit through, you know, classes. Is it grit? Is it the teaching? Is it the furniture? That's comfortable in these chairs? Is it sleep at home? Should we medicate them? You know, what's going on? The kid won't focus on tests. Is it grit? Does the test suck? Is it priorities and values? This test is of no value. You know, is it parental support? These are all things that we've heard teachers throw out, you know, and school administrators throw out stuff. Just without even small things. What's your reaction to these situations?
So you put together your first conversation, your second conversation, then we'd like to have just you as a room. Let's chat about it.
Right.
So what's your perspective on the grit Mary, perhaps something that could be a little different from grit Mary? Where do you land right now? What's your thinking?
You know, it's funny that the conversation, what intrigued me about this whole conversation is grit. I have a college freshman who had difficulty transitioning from high school to college. In the first semester, I wanted to quit computer science, and I had this whole conversation centered around grit. And where did this come to pass? Because I think, you know, myself and also the kids I work with, is that sometimes we don't allow the kids to demonstrate their needs as parents and as educators without picking them up and helping them with the need, rather than saying, do it yourself, here's how you can do it, and then move on.
So I work in school, in school, and one of our core values is actually work. And that was put in because the head school was really into this grit movement. That's the thing. And so when I came in, I was having and I got a lot of backlash from some other people who are way too involved with the kids and not too much let them be too soft on themselves. They're not forcing them to be gritty, which to a lot of people means doing something you don't like because you're attaching things you don't like, and that's part of your life. Which I agree with. I don't think that's more but I don't think that's necessarily, especially for me as a minister, the best way to help them engage. You know, 15 years and they have their own problems, their own ideas on the matter, their own things they're doing outside of school, right? I think it's a lot more, you know, it's more sophisticated than just telling you you have to find yourself, you have to find a way to make it relevant, make it matter to them, and that's the intrinsic motivation that causes you to go along. It's not being told, go. You're not the person to get whatever it's all about. And so that's something that I still do.
To build off of that comment, I feel like if you just push grit, you avoid the conversation about to what ends and what are you being gritty towards, right? And it assumes that you are going to work really hard for a traditional model of success. which for high schoolers is often getting into college. And when I think about an activity that I watch my students deal with varying levels of grit is prepping for college entrance exams, SAT or ACT. And I try to be frank about the fact that I don't think there's a great intrinsic value to those exams, but also that if you want to play the game, right, like, putting more effort into it will, give you a leg up in terms of college admissions, and then you have to decide if that long-term goal is worth it to you, right? So not automatically, you all have to be gritty because you all have to get into the absolute most selective college, but trying to lift the curtain a little bit and show where where the choices now could go in many different directions, right? Not just pushing you all down the same path. Right.
Is grit a way that teachers are packaging conversations about kids conforming to school behaviors?
I'll throw another question out. The best predictor of success in American society is having rich parents. Do rich kids need grit?
Yeah, there's a flip side. On the other end of the spectrum, there's also some attention in the media to the kids who never have their knees skinned, right, and have helicopter parents. So I think there is some theory on that end that yes, those overprivileged kids with the silver spoon in their mouth also need grit, but they need it for the opposite reason, because they've just become terrible people. They're not going to bring down society.
I wanted to share a little soundbite as a superintendent looking out across 7.6 square miles, children that live in rural poverty, places as Becky knows, where we still have kids that don't have home, and kids that live in an urban ring that has a higher level of poverty. It's nothing like you would find in Philadelphia or New York, in the most poverty areas of the urban, but certainly kids coming to us from the National Refugee Center here, they've maybe never lived in a home within a refugee community. So, a variety of kids in our system. We also have the University of Virginia. So we know what kind of parents we have in some of our schools that are dominantly highly affluent schools. Here's what I observe. Let me just put this out as a little bit of I wouldn't call it a theory, a perspective. Our kids that come from the most challenging home environments, I believe, are the most great to school.
They wouldn't have survived.
They've learned how to defend. They've learned how to times get revenge. They've learned how to push back. They've learned how to observe and figure out problem solving in some of those intense ways that people like to do. And yet they are the kids that would be most likely in those schools if you had a teacher comparing two kids, one from a farm, one from poverty, which kid did the teacher say that they would bring to the table? Because her parents had done it. Professor at UVA told me the grade that he was most proud of was the he got on science So one of the things that I question is our mindset about what grit really is and what it is that we can do to capitalize on the very strengths that we all say probably represent resilience, that we sometimes discount because of these things. So I want to put that into the mix as my perspective is the grittiest kids are often the kids that our teachers would say they were used to. Not all of our teachers would say. Don't know.
I would have to argue against the economic perspective. I came from a highly affluent family. Both of my parents my father's 2 PhDs, my mother's 1. My eldest sister is an orthopedic surgeon. My other sister is an investment broker. In lower school and middle school, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. It became a huge problem, which held me back from progressing through school. They didn't have the pigeonhole of ADHD in the 60s and 70s, but I was a problem child because I was a distraction and I was just not good. I fought my way, and I had other avenues. This was also a time when vocational school began, and I was very good when I went to college, and also at a young age. And my parents put me into a private school, and it was kind of like a biscuit for everything. I struggled in private school, but I did find a mentor who latched on and had enough vision that I had what it takes to overcome these things. My own philosophy was suck it up, and I persevered. I did all of the buzzwords were all thrown out, and as a ninth grader in private school, I knew I wanted to be a Latin teacher in private school because this guy took me under his wing.
Oh, let me just say, and we'll get back to conversation. I hear a couple of things that you have, and it's not as big as others. You had parents with the resources to run their business. You had parents with the resources to get to private school and that business school. Grit or abundance surrounding,
I'm speaking of the grit that I had, whether I had resources or not. You could still be the underprivileged child and make a decision to have grit or not.
You can do that, but what is it that gave you that energy?
Well, I just wanted to go off of what you said, because they said like kids from the underprivileged environments or going through things. You said you had these parents like PhDs, everything, but you still had those challenges and issues that help to develop this grit in you. So I think what you're saying is agreeing with what they're saying. Like you still had these things that you needed to get through that developed it in you.
But I would also say, take a kid without those resources in the same circumstances, the outcome might have been different, even though that kid might have had the same level of grit. And I would also like to add, just when we were talking about being wealthy, and about a year ago this time, the University of Pennsylvania campus was dealing with a series of suicides of kids who, on paper, you would have deemed to be successful, but getting A- or B in a class kind of took them over the edge. And I do believe that, that association with wealth or potential for success, sometimes kids don't have to have that grit, and just the least thing that take over the edge.
It is time. Some more from the time.
One of the things that I was going to is when we talk about, we also, when we talk about speaking engagement, with a great engagement with clients. We talk about students who are compliant as we engage. They don't they just being polite and kind. So I think going back to grit and to what you said about struggling through school. Yes, you have grit, but you identify that as not having
And what I want is for people to really examine their assumptions about children and to examine their perspectives on what strengths really are of kids. So as we continue this, keep jumping in on that, because I think it's a great point you bring up, of some kids seem to have something that propels them forward, and some kids seem to struggle with it, and oftentimes it's the expectations in school that you either see or don't see it. So John, and then Diana, you looked like you were going to jump in a couple times, but I'll come back over to you.
Yeah, I think that Mark hit it on the head in terms of, I think that teachers, administrators can use this term grit as a way to collect all of the other questions that they could be asking themselves about what's going on in their classroom. I think 5 out of 20 kids fail a test or not turning in an assignment. So it's kind of a way to kind of rationalize, oh, well, clearly these kids just lack that, in sports is really, that X factor in a way, right? But to your point about students at home, I was a senior last year when all of this is happening. One of the biggest, and I wrote for the newspaper there, and one of the biggest things and challenges that we had to face was how do we open this conversation up about stress and expectation coming from every angle. But I think that that's a different. I think that at a certain point it goes from I'm a 6-year-old child living in a single-parent home, and what resources do I have available to me, to I'm a college student who's had pressure put on me from the day that I entered elementary school that I'm going to make it through college. I think that those are two different things at play.
Well, I'll just jump in a couple of thoughts. Is that the idea of, so we've all seen what we refer to as the enrollment of the kid who has absolutely nothing, no reason to be successful whatsoever, and seems to persevere through all of it. And at times is like, well, that kid, right, the magic child. And we've had them. And I have a very specific kid in mind that there is no good reason why this kid did anywhere near as well as he did, and I don't know what that is as opposed to something else. It's very personal to that kid. And I wouldn't say that you look at those kids and well, if he can do it, it's all bootstrap, that, you just got to put yourself up and do that. So sometimes we get false narratives when we see an example of that. But on the flip side, you also have this kind of moment where you have to look at what is a reasonable expectation of children. All children, for the ones who are high achieving and being close, but also for the ones that are coming in the door that didn't have supper, or up till midnight taking care of small children, or any number of things that are affecting how they walk through that door every day. What is a reasonable expectation? Children in particular, when they come through the door, and then what are the powerful indicators for 5 out of 20 up through your test? It isn't a kid. It's something that you get to react to. It's this responsibility as a teacher to say, I'm getting some fairly powerful feedback when 10 out of 20 kids are doing their homework. That's for you. That's not a reflection. So sometimes we look at some of those feedbacks as, what doesn't that kid have that I need from them, instead of how can I then bend to them to make this more relevant and meaningful, or any of those things, so that by. So those are the two.
I think also it's a question of what the emphasis on the school, and on the leadership of the school, is when we talk to the school, when we're talking about the onus on the individual, or we get conversations with the onus on schools and communities and funding and structures that are creating systems that really students.
To build off of these last two ideas, what Diana said about the narrative, it's also just true about our brains that an individual narrative is way more compelling than a systemic one. It's easier to latch onto and cheer on and be positive. So it's much easier to say to a kid who's struggling with a standardized exam, you can do it, go ahead, I'm going to help you, we'll be gritty together, as opposed to being no, there's actually these crazy systemic reasons that these tests are possibly designed for you to fail, and they have to do with state legislature. That falls real flat, real fast. And it's also, then also gets attacked sometimes from a conservative side as being an excuse, right? Because it's hard to sell in the moment. In the moment, you're a teacher, you're sitting with one student, what do you want to do? You want to help that kid as best as you can and do as best as they can. And that's where that's where that dangerous narrative can creep in of not dealing with it on a system.
And I think that Diana's point about the magic child, the reality is a magic child's like winning the lottery. When you know somebody that does, you're more likely to think that, well, if I throw money at it, maybe I'll be a winner too.
Right.
Reality is my dad captured it, in his low country South Carolina way when he said one time, winning the lottery is about as likely in my life as standing in front of an ATM and barking at it like a dog. And so he kind of understood. The magic kid is a narrative that we believe in. It's like the bootstrap narrative. Moving from poverty to middle class is very, very difficult in this country. But you get a narrative of people that do, and that really reinforces for us that those people must be doing something that we can just get everybody to do it, and everybody will be able to get out there. And that leads us to, I think,
I just want to throw a couple things out and we'll get back to the conversation, which is better than we did. But one of the things that I want to think about is how much of these narratives are cultural. I would argue that the good narrative is I would argue is religious conversation, not scientific. Not everybody lives a definably better life, because we all define better life in different ways, because they work. So Ireland and France limit people to 37 hours a week of work, and never have 2 weeks in a row where you work 5 days a week. And that's their structure to do better life. It's a different thing. But America has always ranked cultures they don't like as animals without grit. These are Irish and African American presentations of the 19th century by Thomas Nast, who sold the world for
but you don't usually see these cartoons.
You don't see these cartoons, and this is a classic construction of the 1850s. They're ignorant and lazy. The Irish are lazy, just the way African Americans are ignorant and lazy. This is the tale that people tell. There's a culture we don't want to let into society. The lazy versus work ethic thing goes on and on. And we're going to skip through a bunch of things. I encourage everybody to look at Duckworth's grit scale, which is on her website. She says, be honest, there are no right or wrong answers, except that when you get into the test, ones that have asterisks on are wrong. So if you say it's very much like the one with an asterisk, you fail.
So I want you to think about that question from your own perspective. New ideas and projects sometimes distract me from previous ones. And remember, her focus on what grit is a capability to pick a goal and stay with it for years or decades, no matter what. So I want you guys to think about this from your own personal perspective.
Samuel Clemens is still working on being a steamboat captain.
So let's just stop here and have a little conversation about, we have people giving this test today out to kids in schools in order to figure out which kids need to work on grit and which ones don't. So talk a little bit about this from your perspective. Where do you see yourself, and how do you see this applying to teaching kids in school? So chat, and then we're going to have some open-ended conversation.
It's like exciting, right?
Sam, I feel like you would fail that one.
Oh, yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
You got your finger in like 20 times.
It makes life exciting, right? Yeah.
I'm
But the other thing is like when you do, it's like even when I'm distracted from somewhere, I'm making like going back to the channel last night. Actually, so even though I might be like distracted or something, I'm seeing like ways that it connects with like my main stuff that I'm doing. So I'm like doing a lot of stuff, but it's like there's connections. So.
Yeah, do you think historically historical actors and any successful ever just has ever just like stuck with one thing over many years. Most of the things that we consider valuable.
But if you want to be an expert, right? Like really the whole like Malcolm level of 2,000 hours. I mean, you're going to spend more time on. Yeah, you're going to spend more time on that. The thing that you're trying to before you can find connections. Anyway, the guy from the panel he does art and he's like mixing all this all together. Then again, I can imagine you being like all over the place, right? So connections and ways to synthesize all of this. It builds on each other. Somebody will have that
Resiliency is a skill each kid.
Were you at the panel last night?
Well, we know that learning.
Let me ask a question. I've had, my life, I've gone to art school, I've gone to architecture school, I've been a New York City police officer, I've been a graphic designer, I've worked in education, in a lot of places.
Also labeled dyslexic.
Well, yeah. She used to introduce me as the most dyslexic person she ever met.
I gotta tell you, and she knows me. I thought it was my husband, but it turns out it's
She once actually had her husband and myself in a dyslexia off in her kitchen. Can you write this down? It was really a fool.
Pam would never do that. Before you go to the next piece, this table has been talking about sort of the grit large, grit small, that regardless of what Duckworth says, the idea that people really want kids to have this sense of being able to know when to do certain things. Can y'all talk a little about what you kind of landed as a group a little bit in your conversation? Just jump in. David?
We just spoke to, the idea. I prefer the word resiliency. I know we kind of use an interchangeability and honest, but I just, my preference is if you're talking about student being resilient, I think it's a factor that all of us can safely say we want every student who walks into our classroom to be. I mean, I want my students to be resilient. I don't necessarily abide by everything about what it says, but I think the fact that she brought it to the forefront of things that are happening in society is valuable. We get people to think that there are these characteristics of students that lead to success. There's a lot of research out there about very intelligent people who study Latinos, who studied African American, Caucasians, in all different circumstances, in all different walks of life, who are living in a low socioeconomic status, in generational poverty. And one of the top contributing factors to these students being successful is not just being told to be resilient, but being taught about resiliency. And we teach students what it means to be resilient, when it's appropriate, when it's inappropriate. But that's where this takes me. That's when I hear grit and resilience, that's where my mind goes. It doesn't go to the grit scale, it doesn't go to other things. It goes to wanting my students to have the knowledge and the power to do things like that. That's kind of where.
So, respond to that. David, you were kind of in that conversation at the table when we come over here. You want to go first?
I was just going to say, the question is, off of that idea, how is the school system that we currently have teaching kids to be gritty, teaching kids to be resilient, when it doesn't matter if you get a 65 or a 76, you're going on to the next topic anyway. We have so many kids every year that doesn't matter, the grade doesn't matter, they're moving on. The understanding of the concept, the understanding of the idea doesn't matter, they're moving on. So the system that we have set up and the system that many of us are trying to move beyond doesn't allow for it. It doesn't, for many of them, it doesn't matter. I had a fourth grader the other day came up to me and said, "Why do I care if I pass that science test?" Fourth grader.
He may be writing that blog in the
Yeah.
But
So Becky, what was respond to that?
one of the things that really strikes me with all of this is that is grit about the kids doing what I want them to do. Because if grit is about the kids doing what I want them to do, then I think we're mixing our metaphors here. We're looking at compliance equals engagement. The grit equals, grades and schooly behaviors. And what I want is I want kids kids are passionate about stuff. They're really passionate. It's incumbent upon me to grab that passion and to find ways to connect it to stuff that the organization at some level cares about. And I think that's, it's incumbent upon me to take that kid that looks me in the eye and says, I suck at math, but I love art, to help that kid find math and art, and to really see that they're great at math. They're just not great at school math the way it's been put in front of them to this point.
So one of the things that I think about for our kids in alcohol is that the things that we care about in an organization are what we call lifelong learning competencies. And those are things that are really pretty big for us, like kids being able to plan and conduct research, whether that means that somebody wants to go be a neuroscientist and do research in the brain, or whether it's somebody that just simply after graduation is going to buy a car. It's about kids being able to communicate with really clear language, big ideas and perspectives and things that are important to them that come out of the work that they're doing. It's about kids being able to really use a lot of creative juice to generate up solutions and interesting ways of thinking about things that they want to do that are expressions of things that matter to us, and hopefully that in our work we can have matter to them. So that's one of the things that we really think about is how do we provide the substrate. If you want to go to my background as a biology teacher, I want our schools to be a kind of auger that grows creativity, that grows kids who can think critically, that grows kids that can work together, and grows kids who can really communicate well. And if we're really growing that, then I think we're growing resilience at the same time.
And an interesting kind of resilience. So I thought when you were saying, I think I was an incredibly resilient kid in my K-12 school. Since what I wanted to do was not be in class ever. I got thrown out of class every single time. You could send me into something every day, and I could get thrown out within 3 minutes. That's real resilience. Because you have to think of a different way to do this. You have to work on this. My hiding friends still remember this. I got a 5th grade teacher that literally chased me around the classroom. It's great moments and stuff. I mean, that's resilience. Because it's me being absolutely dedicated to something that was important. That's okay. That's one way of doing it. But what's the range of what we're doing? I want to show you this one video, a spin-off conversation.
This really follows this
Give
piece
you
about
one quote. This is from one of our high schools. This is was done on the 12th day of school.
one of those guys is the principal. Pick A, B, C, or D.
So, cool out here. I'll tell you this. This room was an empty space on the first day of school. Completely empty space. We ripped out a computer lab, had a library, we finished some glass. This was shot on the 10th day of school. Kids built all this. Julian was as close as we got to being expelled last year.
And he's told our school board that in a work session.
So this is what I want to sort of say about this, because this is an important, thing in my vision of what is happening. One of I think the most important book I've ever read about education is a novel, a Danish novel called Borderlands. And at one point in the novel, this kid who's like the biggest behavior problem one can imagine talks about being in reform school, and this kid who becomes his model of a friend, they have to move through these showers that are hot, cold, rinse off. This kid stays under the cold and stops the alarm. This boy stays hot. It's this abundance that gives kids. We gave these kids this music studio, and it changed their lives. We gave them a music studio, we gave them a school, and the space was okay. We go with it, and they felt like it. We don't find it. We didn't ask them first to do well in class, do well on science tests, do well on reading stuff. We said, here's a place that we think you'll love. And we tried to do that in all our schools. Here's a place that we think you'll love. We have music studios in the high school library. We started putting them into our middle schools. We have, workshops that are open to kids all day to wander into the handstand class and go, I think, our libraries are filled with hacker spaces and gaming zones and maker spaces and, whatever, sewing machines and whatever it is, and cool chairs, bring your food in and eat there and drink there and lounge out. We think it's the abundance that gives kids a place that lets them start to find their route to that grit small, that resilience that comes up. Because I think what Becky says, and Becky said this as long as I've known her, I'm sure many years before, that it is about the misfit of kids in the schools. School didn't fit with me ever. And I'm talking about from kindergarten, I was very good. But first grade through the PhD program. I can give you all the great notes from professors in the PhD program about it. And so, I'd like to spend the rest of the time thinking about what the choices are. Some people, Paul Thomas and Furman, first uses the word slack. This is what kids need. And I think of the moment, and I blogged about this. At one point, when I was, 21, 22, I needed some major repair on my car. Major being it cost like $200, and I had it all. Without my car, I couldn't get through it. And my sisters got together and sent me $200. That's slack. That allows me to be resilient the way you're meant to be. Allowed you to be resilient. I had one high school teacher who got me through high school. Gave me a reason to do that. It's the slack that allows you, like you were saying, in certain situations to get different outcomes because you don't have those resources. Because we all know that there are plenty of people in this country that when their code breaks, their life ends. There's nothing they can do about it. In the same way, when I hear people tell even the magic student stories, there's usually someone there who stepped in with the problem solving. So that notions of slack and abundance really, drive my thinking process around this.
So in Ed Week, Ben, there was a recent post that was put up about the grid. I think it was back in the spring. And in it, Alfie Cohn was quoted because he was questioned by Alfie about, what do you think about this grid work? And he said, basically, the problem how kids are learning, the ownership in schools to get better at how to teach. But our kids getting better at enduring more of the same. Grit's taken off as a fad in education distraction that doesn't address the pedagogical and curriculum problems in school. But the more we focus on grit, the less likely it is that we will make the kinds of changes that help our kids get better at doing school. So when you see like these music studios and other kinds of changes that we're making in Albemarle County, our goal is to provide kids, all kids, not just the gifted kids or the kids in affluent schools where parents can pony up money for, technologies and field trips and all the things that make school interesting for kids, but for all kids to be able to get that kind of access so that we're changing curriculum, changing pedagogy, changing the game so that every kid gets access to what they need to find their passion, to be resilient, to make sense out of what's important to me. Because ultimately, somebody said up front, I think one of the girls did, it's really about what, I want and what I need in order to be successful. It's not just about what the teacher's going to impose on me. So let's see, and you guys had a couple of comments earlier, so you're in class. Yes.
Yeah, so back to the original question you asked us to think about, like I felt, right? I felt that question because I'm like all over the place.
Yeah.
But at the same time, although it looks like I'm all over the place, there are connections, right? Again, as an adult, I can see this, but it's why connected learning is so important. The panel discussion last night talked about the importance of connections. And so, I think it's like the importance of helping kids see the connection to their passion to math or science, even though it's related to somewhere else.
And we need the Edisons who can go through 800 iterations to come up with a light bulb. But I'm also thinking that we need kids that don't just spend their entire life building a light bulb, but do make choices to go from here to here to here to here to here, because it does exactly what you said. You put it together and you end up with something that's a very different package of creativity than what you got with Edison, who stayed very narrowly focused. Thank you, Sandra. Others, yes, jump in. David, you're gonna talk. Yay. Well, we were talking about.
I'm usually not accused of having that problem.
Yeah, David and I were talking about that the Kenny Rogers song, "You Got to Know When to Hold 'Em, You Got to Know When to Fold 'Em," is actually probably a pretty interesting metaphor for resilience. Go ahead.
Just a point about making a connection, so people know how that point in comes from. Trying to tie together the Kingstown and the title of this talk really is a hammer is only a hammer if you take it out of your toolbox. The leave it in your toolbox is just a dead weight that you have to carry around. And so that's the message. I'm just restating the message and trying to tie it into your theme, which is that it's up to us on how we use these tools. So there is value in the idea here, but there isn't much value in the way it's being used. The same way, if you have a nail and you're trying to drive a nail, well, a hammer's a really good tool, but if you take it up on your friend's head, it's not so good.
My granddad used to say something to us kids as we were growing up and learning how to use tools. And it's one of those quotes that's out there, it's not about the bit of fun. The only tool you got is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And I kind of think sometimes our fads in education become the only tool. And it worries me a little bit when you see something like grit become so pervasive, that we've seen a lot of those kinds of things roll through education and lose sight of what's the really important work. So
one more 1 minute video just to keep the conversation going. This is what we're trying to do. And this is a third grade class, writing sentences. Very traditional class. The day after Thanksgiving break, your job is to write 3 sentences or something about the break and go up into. And we're trying to say to kids, find your comfort zone. Now you'll notice a lot of kids are gone already because they finished with kids where they are not stressing about that. This kid's dictating and then copying down what he sees. We're trying to say to kids, how do you want this is Mr. Old School, if you like we're trying to say what makes you comfortable and where to write, what to do things. So just that throw in.
Why don't we start over here, and we're going to come back and grab you, and it looks like maybe a couple of things. All right. These are young women from the I School in New York City who are visiting. Please jump in.
Me? The question about grit? Right, now you make me think about what I said.
About the grades.
Right. Yeah. I guess just the fact that we talk about this grit, but we don't model it. We don't teach it. We send every kid through the same system, and they go through the grades and they go through the all the tests, very much in the same way. And we need to change that conversation.
The school that you used to be,
represents choice. You're there because you've chosen to go there. You're in an environment that is set up to really personalize learning around things that you're interested in and places where you want to go. And it's very much a one-to-one space, so you've got a lot of technology support to really be able to go find the things that you need. So that's not every school. In fact, it's the antithesis of most schools in terms of the philosophy. Back over here,
if I could ask you, what is it that you want to
add that, Ira really challenges me oftentimes with the depth of research that he did around the history of American education and looking at the sociocultural underpinnings as well as economic underpinnings, and focusing on things such as that, you know, that the schools that we have today essentially in many places still are very much factory schools that were set up to educate a few kids well and have the rest of the kids educated enough to be able to go to work in places where they could be very compliant workers. One of the things that he pushes on is not just the expression of that as what I grew up as, you know, understanding as the Protestant work ethic, which in the United States, we're the most stressed out nation in the world about work, and we're the nation that works, puts in more work hours than pretty much anywhere in the world, despite the fact that we might think that the Asian countries do. The reality is we are the hardest worker bees. We're also the most stressed out. The other thing that he's really pushed on with me, and this one is, you know, I grew up in the deep South in South Carolina, and so, you know, I grew up in a school system that was all the way through 1970 basically a segregated school system. We were one of the very last states in the nation to desegregate schools. So one of the things that I have as a very early part of my life for many, many years was a narrative of racism. And so one of the things that he pushes on is the idea that when we talk about things like grit, we really have to go inside ourselves and think about our own cultural biases in terms of why that appeals to us as something that we want to really focus on in schools, and look at it through a lens that's much bigger than just what Duckworth has landed on, which has been very lucrative for her, by the way, as a way of really building out a structure of grit, which I think everybody in the room says and would agree with you. We all want our kids to be resilient. We want our kids to have stick-to-itiveness, but we also want kids that we're not pushing into a box that's defined by some biases that we bring to our work. So I'm wondering, if you might, because we're heading towards wrapping this up, and I would love to have you in with one last conversation at your table.
Because I'll just add, you know, about this cultural thing. It's a funny thing, and I really started making this realization. I have an Irish mother, Irish, born in Derry. My sister, who's a teacher, was at the funeral of a former teacher at a time at a Catholic church up in New York. And she had a Protestant teacher come to the funeral a little late and sit down next to her and say to her, "Where's the book?" Prayer book. Of course, Catholics don't have it. It's an oral ceremony. It's a fully distracting environment. There are pictures all over, there's stained glass, there's incense burning, there's statues, there are amazing things. You know. Plus, masses are usually held all day. You don't have to get time for anything particularly. You know, it's a completely different environment than the Protestant church. But of course, our classrooms are modeled on Protestant. One of the things that I started, you know, the PhD program, research in history was one of the primary stated goals of American education, which we still use in our instructor schools, was what was back in the 1840s and 50s called de-Catholicification. We had these people, these weird, lazy Catholics who weren't used to all this stuff coming in, and we had to change their religion. That was the goal of public schools. It's when public schools were built out, and one of the primary goals was that, to change the culture. The other thing is that our grade structure that we have was adopted, it was imported from the Kingdom of Prussia, it's called the Prussian model. And the Prussian model was developed because in the Napoleonic Wars, the Prussians were very freaked out that some of their officers didn't follow orders. They developed an education system designed to, as they said, ensure that no German soldier would ever again defy orders. This is how these Prussians down in history. Let's have an impact on the 20th century. And the whole goal was we had grades 1 through 8, because the goal was to filter out 80% of kids before high school, 20% would go to high school, that was the clerks. Woodrow Wilson's famous statement, which he said numerous times, was that we need far more minors than we need clerks. That's the whole idea of grade-based standards, is that most kids can't reason. So we built this education system based around a cultural model that's designed to work against people who don't fit society's model. So it's this really strong vision of mine that playing school has huge repercussions for society and for a multi-ethnic society. And I know, it drove Pam totally crazy. The first time she went to Ireland and we went to present at a conference and they say, well, I'm supposed to start at 9:30, so maybe 10, get there around 10. The conference started at about 10:30. There was no schedule to any sessions. It just flagged, well, we like this, so keep going. It's a totally different idea of what work and time looks like. This isn't the only model here. And so we have to think of how culturally biased everything we do in school is. The question you ask is, when an elementary school kid says, why would I pass this test? How do you answer that? Why would they? That's a decision they're making,
So I just want to try to pull some of this together, because it sounds like what we are saying here is that resilience is good, sort of in one definition of it, in the other definition of grit, and then people are saying we need to find these passions and learning that, and that's going to be how we feel true resiliency. But then there's standards, and people feel stuck in the system. So I'm just curious what people's ideas are about how we actually grow this form of resiliency that we believe is good, that we want our kids to have, and to do that within what we are given.
And I will tell you that I think that there is a fresh wind blowing through America today, and while it is very light, that there is some potential, whether it's, and Virginia's not a Common Core state, so I got to tell you, we're not dealing with that. We have our own special issues to deal with in Virginia, but the reality is there's a lot of people starting to question the authority of the folks that want to standardize, scientifically manage schools in the ways that we've been managed for years and years and years, even before much of that time. I believe very clearly that if we're going to educate contemporary kids to live in a nation that has a great deal of diversity, that needs to really focus on a different kind of economy that is more creative-based than it is factory-based, that if we're really going to go after elevating a kind of thinking and doing that really gets at the basic elements of what we've always wanted from an educated citizenry, that wind's got to blow and it's got to get harder and harder, and that we cannot accept the narratives that are being created by people around old traditional models of thinking about school, or thinking about what people need as we define success. And that's what worries me, is that when I saw it, I have to tell you that these kids that made this video about eugenics educated me in 2004 about an area of history that I had no idea. When I went to her webpage and saw that she was quoting Galton front and center, that created some angst for me, because Galton did the United States and the world no favors in setting up a belief that people who may look like that they're feeble-minded, or that they have physical disabilities, or that perhaps that they feel like they're a criminal element, are not people that we need in society. And that scared me to see that we had somebody, we're elevating in education as a new guru, using that as a basis of the narrative that she was writing. Now, she's not proposing that we go out and sterilize people, but Virginia sterilized 7,000 people and didn't stop to 1970 based on his narrative.
I will also throw one other thing that I know
we're going to end with this because we got 1 minute on it.
Right. So I went to high school a long time ago. When I went to a high school, it was created as an alternative high school, about 70% special ed, mostly behavioral and stuff like that. High school was like. It's in New York State, so pre-Common Core and all that stuff, but every high school course required a state exam. We had no required attendance. I took one class the entire 4 years I was in. Did everything else, so the projects, people floating around. It was called, it was great. So we passed the record, we got credit for it. There was nothing that transferred to the in that kind of environment, the probably most at-risk is high school, and there's 50% free lunch students. That produced a 99% graduation rate and a 95% four-year college graduation. One of the things is you take the traditional rules off and let kids move. The evidence has always been that the success comes. Philadelphia, not far from here in the 70s, was a school called Parkland School, the Parkland Project. The most successful school the city of Philadelphia ever had was the same kind of high school. A successful school getting at-risk kids through and on four-year college. Much of the narratives we believe in at this point are myths. The only time, it's like history of education coming back here, the only time the U.S. closed the achievement gap in this country was when open classrooms, new math, and the whole language. It's the only time the achievement gap closed, and the only time all students did better on like debate tests and things. Only time. So we believe a lot of things now. Rigor, things we call rigor and grit and stuff, it simply proved not to be true when you research the history of schools. And it's an important thing to think about what these counter-narratives are. Okay, if we trust children, we always say that one of the slogans of our division is we trust children and childhood. We trust kids that if we give them the tools, give them the space, and give them the resources, they will do great things. We have a 2% dropout rate. We have a 94% on-time graduation rate. We just see that when we try to do things differently, we get different answers.
So, we always like to end by having people talk to each other. So, we thank you for being here. We know that some of you we were preaching to the choir. There's some people you were probably in a different place, and that's okay. A lot of different perspectives out there. What we'd love to have you do is to take 1 minute, no more than 1 minute, and reflect on your own biases and thinking about grit, maybe something that you either landed on that pushed you a little bit or pulled you to the other side. So just do a little bit of a debrief on what you believe maybe you got as a takeaway today, something that challenged your thinking, or something that affirmed you, or that moved you a little bit. So just have that chat time. And then we will see you and enjoy Educon, one of the best conferences out there.
Like, is that, I don't know, seems like all saying, oh, I need it, like, I had it, I sucked it up. Like, there always is that, but then there's this really it's like, whose story actually just involves someone to say, suck it up, you know? And it seems like that's impossible. At least my question is like, what can teachers, if I say I'm using that for a student, am I actually, is that really such a deficit model? Can I love my students and
see what happens and let them.
Is it black and white or is there? Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah. So I have been like pushing back.
How everyone talks about that. You always have to somehow.
I mean,
I think we live like, individualistic society. So even with like kids, when we're trying to come to these communities, schools, right? You're like, and we have circles and like, oh, that's his problem. Like, that's on him. If he don't want to come, and so we circle up a kid and we're trying to like give him, he doesn't want to do it. Or the other thing is like we're going to grind them up. Like so, like when they bring a kid in the circle, it's all about grinding them up. I'm like, no, we're trying to support this kid. Like he's doing harm to himself and to our community by like not engaging in the work. It's not just woes on him, but I'm like, what he's doing is the same.
I was just reading about
That's how I'm feeling. You know?
Trying to get away from it.
1 year. I have no feeling about that.
The grid is
I feel that it's you that I'm like, yeah, wait, let's talk about what you need.
the grid is he has grit, but collectively, we're community.
The other thing I want to piece of this is how much is this just another version of this grit just as how I expand. I feel like that ends up being like, no, you need to make it so people are ready.
Yeah, and then we even put those pressures on kids with our leaders, you know, oh, too much is good, too much is too hard. Like, hey, you know, I just gotta worry about myself.
And that's that to me is that there are other things something like that. It's just such a
No, well, they need to make this reform Ann and I have made one tomorrow, and one of the skills. Oh my God, that's amazing. I don't think that's a lot of time. It's too much skill. Too much. Were you at the same
When you think about that, like that is what it is.
So like practice stuff real quick.
It's basically a sex workshop. The kids are all there's a kid I was talking about earlier, successful as a person that passes classes. So in that, they spent the summer internship with the different cases. So we have like an external group that comes in and they build a like pop-up skate park. Yeah. So yeah, again, the kid is when does the next when is the next period start? The school at 6 o'clock. Yeah, but he's not passing his class. So
like maturity. Yes, absolutely.
But I don't know. So let's say though, is there such thing?
No, he was lazy. Like it's hard. Is laziness a part of the maturity thing? I was because adults can be lazy. And then lazy will be like, no, you gotta mature. You gotta eat. You can't be so lazy, right? No, you have to eat. I mean, unless you want to. Everybody good on the welfare system.
But even that is a whole lot of work.
Everyone's like, what work do I put in?
I guess my question is like, I'm a little tempted. This might be a little extreme. Like, why? Is there ever just like lazy rest? I just really don't feel like it.